Hello. I like to watch home renovation shows, design shows, and there's one that has 4 pairs competing over a number of weeks to win a large monetary prize. Each pair, and it's often a couple, has one person who's a designer and one person who is a builder. And they are working together one room or section of the house at a time, week by week. And the houses are all new builds, all in a row, and you can design the interior, the exterior in whatever style you want. One week it's the kitchen, next week it's the master bathroom, and so on. And there's a weekly prize, and then there's an ultimate prize at the end. Each house has a style that the builder and the designer pick early on, modern or rustic or whatever. Many weeks, there's some sort of random thing chucked into the process. For example, they might be called the day before their room is done, or 6 hours before their room is to be done, and be handed an object that they have to fit into the design of that particular room. It might be an old oar, or a rusty bucket, or a set of moose antlers, or a ladder. And they not only have to put it in the room, but they have to make it into a useful object, like a lamp. And so it can be really challenging because it can be dumped on them when it's almost done, and it can really frustrate them, because how do you fit this thing into a style that you've got going and a plan that you have, and now you have to fit in a rusty bucket? These random things are super irritating because you can't make them fit. Sometimes things happen like that in our lives. We have a plan. Things are moving along, and then suddenly something is dropped into our life, and somehow we have to adjust. It just has to be made to fit, like it or not. And some of those things are simply annoying, and others turn everything upside down. Some are good, and some are really painful. And they feel random, without context. And we struggle to make them fit, to see any use for this thing that has happened in our lives. Today we begin the book of Esther, and it's a great story, often a familiar one, but over the next 3 weeks, I want you to have a fresh look at it. Esther is the only book in the Bible in which the name of God is not mentioned at all. There is no reference to God, either in the words of the characters or by the narrator of the story. And it's easy for us to see from the outside, and knowing the end, that God's guiding hand is all over the events. But try to put yourself in the story and think about it from the perspective of those in the story as they lived it. They do not know how it's going to end. Lots of this just seems like random events dropped without purpose into the plans they have for their lives. And a lot of these random things are really painful. We also need to try and understand the cultural context of the story. We don't think of marriage the way they do, nor do we have the same emotional responses to marriage. We think of connection and love, of partnership and affection. They think of advancement of family interests and practicality. Their emotions, therefore, over marital issues are very different from our own. There are power dynamics in this story that are also very different from what we see in our culture. What we may think of as a choice is actually something over which the characters in the story have no control. So with all of that said, let's dive into chapter 1. We are introduced to the king, Xerxes, or, depending on the version you're using, Ahasuerus, the Hebrew variant of the same name. He is king of Persia, which at this time is huge. It stretches from India to the upper Nile River. It has conquered a vast amount of territory, basically all the way to Ethiopia. And there are 127 provinces of the Persian kingdom. The seat of the kingdom is Susa, which is today in southwest Iran. Susa is a UNESCO World Heritage Site today and has extensive excavations of the palace. History has a number of stories about Xerxes. He was a violent, cruel, and unpredictable man, sometimes kind and generous, other times quick to put people to death. Sometimes even someone he had previously shown kindness to, this time he kills them. Not a nice person, not a guy you want to get on the wrong side of. Xerxes had invited a ton of officials and princes and nobles and military leaders from around his kingdom for a display of his wealth and prestige. He has proudly displayed how great he is to all of his officials. This had gone on for an astonishing 180 days, 6 months. And at the end of this, he put on a massive banquet. It lasted 7 days. It was lavish and opulent. It was for all the people who lived in Susa, great and insignificant, and seemingly was held in the gardens of the palace. There were gold goblets for drinking, each different, and gold and silver couches and hangings of white and blue linen, lavish food, and a lot of wine. Now, this banquet, hosted by the king, would have been for men only. The women are at a banquet hosted by Queen Vashti, and it would have been held in a separate part of the palace. On the 7th day of the banquet, with the wine flowing, and the king very likely under the influence, he decides to call Queen Vashti to appear before the men wearing her royal crown. For, we are told, he wishes to display her beauty for all to see. Now, I bet you wondered why he may have done this and why Vashti refused to come. There are various opinions. If you were hoping I'm going to tell you the answer, you're going to be disappointed. First, because I don't know, and also because it really doesn't matter, which is likely why God didn't tell us. The queen refuses to come, and the king is furious. He consults his advisors, and they say that this is going to be a problem. Certainly, if there is a wife in all of the Persian kingdom who should be expected to obey her husband, it would be the wife of the king who rules 127 provinces. The one who has all the power and has been put on display for everybody for the last 180 days. If she gets away with not obeying her husband, then other wives will feel free to disobey theirs. That's what the officials tell Xerxes. In reality, this is a blow to the sense of entitlement the king has. He is the supreme person of power in the known world at this time. She is just simply a part of his possessions. How dare she not obey? He is enraged at her defiance of his position. His advisors may simply have been appealing to the vanity of the king because they know what he's like. And so the decision is made, with the advice of his advisors, to remove Queen Vashti from her position. Never again will she be allowed in the presence of the king, and her position as queen will be given to someone else. So proclamations are sent throughout the land informing everyone that Vashti has been removed as queen for disobeying the king. Now, in many ways, as I read this chapter, it seems to me the writer is contrasting the perceived sovereignty and power of the king with the sovereignty of God, which is going to be shown in the subsequent chapters. Xerxes has huge power and thinks very highly of himself and his power, far more than he should. Admittedly, he is the most powerful person in the world at the time, but like so many of the human race, he doesn't consider the power of God. There's nothing inherently wrong with power. There are lots of positions of power in our world, most nowhere near as huge as what Xerxes had. But teachers have power, and employers, parents, leaders of countries have power, spouses have power, so do pastors. Sometimes children have power over elderly parents. Power used correctly to help others is fine. It's when it's used to hurt others or advance our own interests that we get into trouble. Xerxes likely exerted his power over his wife as a symbol to others of his greatness, and he caused a lot of harm that will have repercussions for many people. Uncontrolled human power always causes damage. Who in your life is under your power? Your children, your spouse, a parent. Perhaps it's other children, not your own, that you teach, or people who work under your direction, or perhaps you have a job with a title attached. How are you using the power you've been given? What, with kindness and love, seeking the best for the other person, or with an agenda that's all about you? Pride is one of the most prevalent of human sins. Pride and a desire to advance one's own self combined with power over others is a bad recipe. Will you ask God to show you today if you are misusing power over someone in your life? And if you are, to put it right and to do better from here on out. Now we move into chapter 2, and we see the first set of consequences from the king's power move against Vashti. History says that there is a bit of a time frame, a a series of events that happened between chapter 1 and chapter 2. History says Xerxes and his army go off and fight a war. And when he returns, his anger has cooled, but he realizes he doesn't have a queen. I'm guessing that his pride makes him feel entitled to the very best queen he can find, and perhaps he doesn't feel that there is a woman among his concubines who is as lovely as Vashti was, and so he doesn't find any of them suitable to be crowned queen. At any rate, his advisors suggest a mega beauty contest of a depraved sort, although at this time, this would have not been considered all that surprising of an action on the part of a king. A search is made all over the kingdom to find beautiful young virgins who are brought to Susa. They are put under the care of a eunuch in charge of the women. And there, these girls would be given a year of beauty treatments, and then, one at a time, they would be presented to the king. And the one the king likes best would be made queen in place of Vashti. And here we find the first mention of the Jews who are still living in Babylon under Persian rule. Now, to give you a time frame, the nation of Judah, comprised of the tribes of Judah and Benjamin and the Levites who lived among them, had been taken captive by Babylon and lived in exile there for 70 years. Toward the end of that time, Babylon fell to the Persians, and the Jews fell under Persian rule. Under the reign of Cyrus, the first king of Persia that ruled the whole of the kingdom, the first group of Jews had gone back to Judah and rebuilt the temple. Over a period of 100 years or so, 3 groups of Jews in total would return to Judah. This story falls between the return of the first group and the return of the second group. So there are still a lot of Jews living in Persia. Among the Jews living in the citadel of Susa is a Benjamite named Mordecai. He did not return to Jerusalem with the first wave of exiles who went home. He has living with him an adopted daughter. In terms of their actual family relationship, they are cousins, but he has taken her as a daughter because she is an orphan. Her Hebrew name is Hadassah, but in Persia, she is known as Esther. Hadassah means myrtle or bride, and Esther is a Mesopotamian goddess of love, fertility, and war, and tied to a star that brings both good and harm. She is beautiful, and somehow she comes to the attention of those seeking women for the king. She's taken into custody in the palace, in the house of the women. Now I want you to hear this part. She did not voluntarily participate in this pageant. Her adoptive father did not have to give permission. She was taken, no choice. The king is seeking the most beautiful girls. She is beautiful, she goes. End of story. Often when you tell this story to kids in Sunday school, they see this as kind of a Disney story, a wonderful love story. How great that she maybe gets to be queen, she gets to meet the king, and maybe he will fall in love with her. That's not what this story is. Esther was never going to go home again. No matter the outcome of this search for a queen, she is going to be a possession of the king for the rest of her life. She will live cloistered in the house of the women, in the harem of the king, and never live with her adoptive father or her own people again. This is a complete change in her life, a completely unexpected, seemingly random event that will overturn everything she knows. Mordecai tells her, perhaps as she is gathering her things to go with the men who have chosen to take her, he tells her not to reveal that she is a Jew. Maybe Mordecai thinks it will not go well for her if they find out. She is not coming back, no matter what. So he perhaps wants her to have the best possible reception and life where she is going. I wonder what thoughts she had on her way to the palace. How could this happen? Why did God allow it? Or did she even think of God? We don't know. But it seems odd that God would allow a Jewish girl to be taken and to be made a concubine of a pagan Gentile king. How is that God's will? This is a terrible moment in her life. We're told something that indicates, however, that God is with her in this. So I'm going to read from verses 8 and 9 of chapter 2. Oops, that's Ruth. How did I get into Ruth? I need Esther. Hang on a sec. Here we go. Esther 2. When the king's order and edict had been proclaimed, many young women were brought to the citadel of Susa and put under the care of Haggai. Esther also was taken to the king's palace and entrusted to Haggai, who had charge of the harem. She pleased him and won his favor. Immediately he provided her with her beauty treatments and special food. He assigned to her 7 female attendants, selected from the king's palace, and moved her and her attendants into the best place in the harem. This comment, she found favor, is similar to what we have in the lives of Daniel and Joseph. Although God is not mentioned, he is working. This random event orchestrated by the king is under the control of God, and he is at work for Esther and for his people. Fortunately, Mordecai lives in the town that surrounds the palace of Susa, so he goes daily and walks back and forth near the courtyard of the harem to try to find out how Esther is doing. The story seems to indicate he cannot actually see her, but has the ability to pass messages. The process these women go through before seeing the king is extensive. 6 months in oil and myrrh, and 6 more with perfume and cosmetics. Then each girl would spend a night with the king. No choice for her. She would go to him in the evening, and in the morning be taken to a different section of the house of the women where the concubines are kept. She would stay there and never go to the king again unless he asked for her by name. Each girl is given whatever she wants to take with her when she goes. I'm guessing this would include clothing or other things to make themselves more attractive to the king. Esther asked for nothing extra. She cannot get out of this, but she makes no effort to influence the outcome. She's leaving this in the hands of God. In verse 17, we are told the outcome of this whole beauty pageant thing. Chapter 2, verse 17. Now the king was attracted to Esther more than any of the other women, and she won his favor and approval more than any of the other virgins. So he set a royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. And the king gave a great banquet, Esther's banquet, for all his nobles and officials. He proclaimed a holiday throughout the provinces and distributed gifts with royal liberality. And so a lowly Jewish girl becomes queen of Persia, married to a cruel and unpredictable king. What a random and life-altering event. Nothing for her is ever going to be the same. The chapter then tells us of another seemingly random event. Mordecai is sitting at the gate of the king's palace. Now, this might indicate some rise in position for him, as this is often a place of influence, or maybe he's just there trying to get news of Esther, but he overhears something. 2 of the officials of the king plot to assassinate Xerxes. I wondered if Mordecai was tempted, even for a moment, just to let the plot proceed. But with a king like Xerxes, I think maybe many would have been tempted. But Mordecai does what's right, and he has Esther told. She reports it and gives the credit to her adoptive father for uncovering this plot. An investigation proves the plot exists, and the 2 plotters are executed. This is all recorded in the annals of the king, but somehow the king seems not to have really noticed or paid any attention to this. The actions of Mordecai are completely overlooked at this time. God's name is not mentioned anywhere in this, but God is moving. He is maneuvering his own people into positions where he can use them for his own purposes. His plans prevail. I'm going to read a verse from Isaiah 14, verses 26 and 27 about the plans of God. This is the plan determined for the whole world. This is the hand stretched out over all nations, for the Lord Almighty has purposed, and who can thwart him? His hand is stretched out, and who can turn it back? God's sovereign power prevails over all human plans and authority. Sovereignty of God is a doctrine that states that he is in complete control over all things, over all events, people, actions, natural catastrophes, etc. He does not cause all these things to happen. He does not do sinful or evil things, but he allows each thing that comes into our lives. The doctrine is simple in concept, but it's quite difficult in application. The sovereignty of God is hard when something seemingly random falls into our lives that is painful or confusing or impossible to understand. They make us wonder, why did God do this? What good can come from this? What is God up to? We ask hard questions, and we often do not get answers. We end up having to consider what we know to be true about God. We remind ourselves that he is good and just and holy, that he is compassionate and loving and merciful and true. We have to trust what we know of his character when we cannot understand what he is doing or what he has allowed in our lives. Our minds are simply too small to wrap itself around the way God's sovereignty works in the events of our lives. The sovereignty of God requires us to trust him for what we don't understand. His character enables us to trust him. Esther could not have fathomed what God is doing. We actually don't know if she even considered God in these events, at least not at this point. But God is fully in control, and he is moving people into place for events that only God knows lie ahead. Ultimately, God uses human events and his own sovereign plans to accomplish good for all human beings. The ultimate plan is the salvation of sinners through the death of Jesus on the cross. This is the climax of all of God's plans. In itself, the cross of Jesus was a terrible event, a miscarriage of justice, a violent, unjust action, horrible to watch or even to consider. And yet it accomplishes great good. God's sovereign, and in his sovereignty, he accomplishes our salvation, and that gives us a reason to trust him when our lives seem random and confusing. What seemingly random events have fallen into your life lately? What things seem horrible or terrifying or overwhelmingly sorrowful, and you're simply unable to make any sense out of them? What do you know to be true about God? He is good, for he offers a way out of our sin. He is merciful and loving and providing salvation for us when we do not know him. He is just in paying the penalty of our sin. The cross shows us who he is. In light of the cross, how can you trust him to be doing good for you in your circumstances, even when you don't understand them? You do not know the end of your story. Esther did not know the end of hers, but God knows hers and yours. Will you trust him that this is not random and that he has good in mind for you?